Today is Friday, November 27th. What to know about President Trump's latest pardon, who he let off the hook, and who calls it an abuse of power. Also, new rules at hospitals around the country as the number of COVID-19 patients breaks records, and which coronavirus rules the Supreme Court says are not allowed and violate religious rights. Plus, why one of the biggest stars in the NFL is sidelined, the pros and cons of two major book publishers joining forces, and the U.S. celebrates Native American Heritage Day. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. President Trump is facing some fresh controversy over a presidential pardon. Trump pardoned his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, on Wednesday. Now remember, back in 2017, Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about having contact with the Russian ambassador at the time. But then earlier this year, Flynn's new legal team accused prosecutors of misconduct and asked to have his guilty plea withdrawn. So far, those efforts have not worked. A judge dismissed the claims. But now the pardon from the president means Flynn will not have to face any time in prison, and it's likely case closed. The Flynn family put out a statement thanking Trump for, quote, answering our prayers and the prayers of a nation by issuing that pardon. The pardon does not come as a huge surprise, since Trump also issued a pardon in July for another associate, Roger Stone, who was convicted of witness tampering and lying to Congress, also during the Russia investigation. Still, some top Democrats, like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, are calling the most recent pardon a brazen abuse of power. House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler accused Trump of only pardoning Flynn so Flynn would not say anything that might implicate Trump in other crimes. But either way, it seems the president is within his rights here. Under the Constitution, presidents do have the power to pardon and commute sentences related to federal crimes. The number of COVID-19 patients in American hospitals hit a record high for the 17th straight day on Thanksgiving. The COVID Tracking Project says more than 90,000 Americans were in the hospital with COVID-19 on the holiday. And many medical centers are warning they're running out of room. So now, a few states are delaying all elective procedures that require overnight stays. Also, some places have changed the rules so doctors and nurses with COVID-19 can keep working, so hospitals don't have to deal with such a large staffing shortage. For example, in North Dakota, that's the rule now, as long as the infected medical workers only work in COVID-19 units with other COVID patients. And all over the country, there are nurses coming out of retirement to deal with this crisis. The largest nurses union in the country, National Nurses United, says hundreds of retired nurses are answering the calls for help. Still, even all that will not be enough if hospitalizations keep going up. And doctors don't want to run into the worst case scenario of patients who could have been saved dying because they were waiting for care. So they're begging people to socially distance as much as possible, wear a mask in public, and wash their hands regularly. The nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said it's important to remember healthcare workers are putting their lives and their safety at risk. The U.S. Supreme Court overruled some coronavirus-related restrictions in New York. The state's governor tried to enforce 10 and 25-person capacity limits on churches, synagogues, and other religious institutions. But Catholic and Orthodox Jewish groups sued, and now they've won. The High Court justices agreed with the religious groups in a split 5-4 decision. Now, this is a shift for the Supreme Court. Earlier this year, it weighed in on similar restrictions affecting churches in California and Nevada. And at that time, the Supreme Court gave an opposite ruling. So what changed? Well, for one, the people on the bench. The late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had voted in favor of the capacity limits. She died in September. And this time, her successor, the new Justice Amy Coney Barrett, voted against the restrictions. The majority of the justices, including Barrett and 4 others, said the restrictions on religious institutions violate the First Amendment, freedom to worship. Chief Justice John Roberts and 3 others, though, disagreed. Roberts said the governor and public health officials are allowed to put restrictions in place if it's for public safety. Now, to be clear, by the time this case made it to the Supreme Court, New York had already gotten rid of those particular restrictions in the state since cases of COVID-19 had dropped. But this new court decision is a sign of how justices could rule again if new restrictions are added and religious groups file new lawsuits. It's known as the nation's report card, a time to track U.S. students' knowledge across the country. But now national standardized reading and math tests have been pushed back a year because of the pandemic. The National Center for Education Statistics is in charge of this and had originally planned for hundreds of thousands of 4th and 8th graders to take the test in early 2021. But not anymore. The NCES is worried about increasing the risk of spreading the coronavirus in schools and communities. For example, they usually send outsiders into schools to administer these tests, and they say trying to follow additional health protocols would cost tens of millions of dollars. So instead, the national testing is now set for 2022. Now that this national testing is postponed, some say state testing in 2021 is even more important in order to keep sufficient data on students' learning, because already state testing was canceled in 2020. And there are concerns students have suffered academic setbacks this year. To be continued. More news still ahead, but first, a quick break for our sponsor. I'm guessing most of you are doing like I am and wearing more sweatshirts and sweaters right now because it's getting colder outside. But that cooler weather and feeling of needing to bundle up can actually mean we're more easily missing signs of dehydration. Yet it's still so important to keep our bodies properly hydrated. That's where Liquid IV can be a huge help. One stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water gives you 2 to 3 times the amount of hydration as plain water. And I love that their best-selling hydration multiplier now has 3 new flavors: guava, watermelon, and apple pie. If you're a fan of watermelon Jolly Ranchers, you will love the watermelon flavor. But there are so many great tasting options to choose from. And I found no matter which flavor I drink, I love that it always does the trick to quench my thirst and make me feel more energized. Liquid IV is available nationwide at Walmart in the beverage section, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code newsworthy at checkout. That's 25% off anything you order when you use the code newsworthy at liquidiv.com. Get better hydration today at liquidiv.com with the promo code newsworthy. Now, back to the news. Today is Native American Heritage Day. The holiday encourages all Americans to honor the rich culture, tradition, and history of Native Americans. The holiday was officially designated by President Barack Obama in 2009, and some people commemorate the day with ceremonies and activities. Now, that said, some Native Americans are not happy the holiday falls on the day after Thanksgiving. They say the holiday basically takes a back seat to Thanksgiving and competes with Black Friday. But other Native Americans call it a good first step and encourage people to commemorate the day and hope it becomes more widely recognized. Well, as we mentioned, it is Black Friday today, and that means companies are rolling out some of their biggest deals of the year. And that said, this year is definitely different from years past. For example, most stores have been phasing in their Black Friday deals for weeks now because they want to avoid stores dealing with huge crowds during the pandemic. Companies are also gearing up for a surge in online shopping. Meantime, small businesses are hoping for a big weekend. Tomorrow is Small Business Saturday, when people are encouraged to shop local and support independent creators. This year, small businesses say they're depending on holiday shoppers more than ever because the pandemic has taken a toll on their bottom line. And it seems people want to step up. A recent Google survey shows 66% of shoppers plan to spend more money at local businesses this year. And a quick shout out to all of you for supporting our independent operation here at The Newsworthy every time you listen and share the show. And of course, a huge thanks to our Newsworthy insiders for your monthly support. If you want to join, you can go to thenewsworthy.com/insider to learn more. 2 major book publishers have struck a deal. Penguin Random House bought Simon & Schuster in a deal worth $2 billion. As the New York Times puts it, this will create the first so-called mega publisher. Penguin Random House is already the biggest publisher in the U.S., and the 96-year-old Simon & Schuster, which is currently owned by Viacom CBS, is the 3rd largest. So the Wall Street Journal reports if the sale goes through, one company will end up controlling about 1/3 of all books in the U.S. Critics are not okay with this. They say one publisher would end up dominating the market. Some even wonder if it will get approval from the U.S. Justice Department due to antitrust concerns. But others say the book industry already has a ton of competition, so there's no need to worry about one company taking over. For now, the deal is expected to close next year. The NFL's reigning MVP has tested positive for COVID-19. We're talking about the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. At this point, Jackson has not said if he's experiencing any symptoms, but his absence will definitely be felt. He's just the latest Ravens team member to test positive recently. In fact, the team was actually supposed to play the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday on Thanksgiving Day, but the game was pushed back to Sunday because 9 other Ravens players and several staff members either have it or may have been exposed to someone who has it. Meanwhile, COVID-19 continues to rattle college football as well. Alabama head coach Nick Saban tested positive for the virus. He told ESPN he's feeling okay for now and only has mild symptoms like a runny nose. That said, he will not be able to coach Saturday's game against Auburn, and that's a big disappointment since the Alabama-Auburn rivalry is one of the biggest in college sports. A Scottish deerhound took home the top prize at this year's National Dog Show. The pooch, named Claire, beat out hundreds of other dogs to win Best in Show. The judges say she was the, quote, picture of elegance. She kind of looks like a large greyhound, but she's bigger and has a rough coat. Other standout breeds this year were the Poodle, Wire Fox Terrier, and English Springer Spaniel. They all competed in the Scaled Back Show. It did not have any spectators, vendors, or sponsors because of the pandemic. It also only had about 600 dogs competing rather than the usual 2,000. And that's it for the main news today, but now it's time for Feel Good Friday, when we bring you one extra feel-good or positive news story before the weekend. And today we're talking about this year's U.S. Rhodes Scholars. Remember, this is an award that allows recipients to study for free at Oxford University in England. And when it comes to higher education, it's one of the most prestigious awards you can get. Well, among them this year is Mackenzie Fierston. The Philadelphia Inquirer reports she grew up bouncing from one foster home to the next. She said it was extremely challenging and isolating, and she was known as the foster kid at school. Well, she aged out of the child welfare system, and now at 23 years old, she's one of only 32 winners chosen out of more than 2,300 applicants. Fierston said she feels like she won this on behalf of all the children in foster care, proving they can beat the odds and people do care about what happens to them. On top of that, this year's group of winners are among the most diverse ever. The AP reports 22 of the winners are students of color. They were just announced last weekend, and the scholars will begin their studies at Oxford University in October 2021. All right, thank you so much for listening today. We'll be back with our special edition Saturday episode all about the science of happiness. That comes out tomorrow, and then we'll be back for another news roundup on Monday. Until then, have a great day.